let's look at this limit. It's very similar to the one in Stewart Calculus, section 2.3, number 29. This one's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's something that you might find if you've got WebAssign homework. It's a very typical replacement for that 3.1.29 question. All right, so we've got the limit as t goes to 0 of 3 over t times the square root of 1 plus t minus 3 over t. We are going to start by getting this over a common denominator. So if I multiply this 3 over t by the square root of 1 plus t over the square root of 1 plus t, then I can simplify this. Put an equal sign here. Limit as t goes to 0 of 3 minus 3 square root of 1 plus t all over t times the square root of 1 plus t. Okay, so that got us our common denominator. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out the 3's here. If I can factor out that 3, then I don't have to deal with it while I'm working on the rest of the problem, and that'll make things a little bit simpler. So that's going to give me 3 times, or not 3, the limit as t goes to 0 of 3 times 1 minus the square root of 1 plus t over t times the square root of 1 plus t. Well, that is exactly the same as if I brought that 3 out front. So I can bring the 3 out front. That leaves me with 1 minus the square root of 1 plus t on top and t times the square root of 1 plus t on the bottom. So now I see that I've got the setup up here, this 1 minus the square root of 1 plus t. And this is something that when you're looking at limits, you should think when you see this scenario where you've got a radical and a minus sign and a perfect square, that we're going to be able to use the conjugate to simplify things a bit. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do this here. I'm going to multiply this particular rational function by 1 plus the square root of 1 plus t over 1 plus the square root of 1 plus t. So I'm just multiplying by 1. Something over itself is 1, so I'm not changing anything here. But let's see what happens when we do that. So we get the limit as t goes to 0, 3. When I multiply out the top, and if you don't believe me, do it. Actually FOIL this out for yourself. You're going to end up with 1 minus 1 plus t. And on the bottom, you're going to end up with t times the square root of 1 plus t plus t times 1 plus t. All right? And again, you can check that by using your distributive property, but that's exactly what happens when we do this multiplication here. All right, so next step, let me factor out the t on the bottom and let me simplify what's going on top there. All right, so I get the limit as t goes to 0 of 3. If I simplify, I get 1 minus 1 minus t. The 1 minus 1 goes away. That leaves me with a negative t on top. Then on the bottom, if I factor out the t, I'm going to end up with the square root of 1 plus t plus 1 plus t on the bottom. All right, so this is starting to look like something that I might be able to simplify and plug a 0 into. All right, so this t, I can actually cancel the t's. So I'm going to get the limit as t goes to 0 of 3 times negative 1 on top, and then the square root of 1 plus t plus 1 plus t on the bottom. All right? Last thing I do, I think I'm safe. I can start plugging stuff in now. I get 3, have the negative 1 on top, square root of 0 plus 1 plus 1 plus 0. And, oops, there. And so that's going to give me negative 3 over 2, which is my final answer. Okay, so here's all the information there, and I'm going to put a link up to a PDF of the solution so that you can kind of follow along and make sure that you catch everything that happened there.